Today I wanted to talk about spiritual blindness. That is our topic for today. And if you need a sign sheet, a little worksheet, we have them in the back. That's what I probably should have started off with. And I'll have the points and application questions. If you want to get a head start, we're going to be in Mark chapter 8, verses 11 through 21. Mark chapter 8, verses 11 through 21. That's where we're going to be at today. So I want to say every part of the Bible is for our edification, or an example, or else why is the word there? Why is it there? Today we're going to read some examples of those who are seeking God and those who are not. There's some very prominent signs of people who are not looking for God and people who are looking for God. We're going to read that today. There's also in other books we could look, like in Jude and 2 Peter, where it shows people that are among the brethren that are there not for good things. They're there for bad things. And they may look like the brethren, they may speak like the brethren, but they're in fact not the brethren. As with every Bible study that I do, I find myself to be a bit ashamed, because I am reminded about how forgetful I am. Are you like me? Are you forgetful? I know Jay is. Don't forget right in front of me. But are you like me? Are you forgetful? Because I don't forget how wonderful God is. I don't forget that God is wonderful. What I do forget is how wonderful God has been, is, and always will be. That's what I forget. I am reminded with my finite mind about the magnitude of His greatness. How many here think God is great? Anybody here? If you don't think God is great, Pastor Josue will be here after service, and he can probably pull out a list about why God is great. Not in anybody else's life, but in your life. But when I talk about greatness and God's greatness, I'm not necessarily talking about physical things. Although I am grateful for those. I think God is absolutely great because He changes the heart. Here's an example of what I'm trying to say. Is it better for Fulgencio to be physically pushed into doing something, or for him to do it because Fulgencio wants to? Because sometimes we can make people do what we want them to do. But is it better when they do it because they want to do it? Right, Maddie? Is it good? Is it better when you try to force somebody to love God, to pursue God, to read about God, to pray to God? Or is it better when they have the desire to do such things because it is born like a fountain from within their heart to do so? Which was better? The forcing or the desire? And that's what God does. He takes a heart, your heart, that is unable and unwilling, to a heart that is able and willing. And that's why today is spiritual blindness. From a heart that is unwilling, not only unwilling but unable, to a heart that is willing and able. Nobody knows this better than somebody who's praying for someone else who has not given their life to God. Or maybe you have prayed for somebody, and that person has come to God. On the 4, you're waiting, you're expecting, you're hoping patiently. Not just sometimes for months, but for years. Maybe some of you are there. When are they going to do it? God. This is year 22 of praying and asking. Sometimes it's begging. When will they realize that they need you? But how sweet is it when they finally give their life to the Lord? And all those, and your parents probably know this, those sleepless nights. When you're awake late at night and nobody even knows. When you're praying for your child, when you're praying for your parents, when you're praying for a family, in hope. So let's read some of these examples. Let's read our text for today in Mark chapter 8, verses 11 through 21. Please bear with me, these 10 verses. Then the Pharisees came out and began to dispute with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven. Him is Jesus. That's who we're talking about. The Pharisees to Jesus. Keep that in mind. But he sighed deeply in the spirit and said, why does this generation seek a sign? Assuredly, I say to you, no sign shall be given to this generation. And he left them. And getting into the boat again, departed to the other side. Verse 14. Now the disciples had forgotten to take bread, and they did not have more than 1 loaf with them in the boat. Verse 15. Then he charged them, saying, take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have no bread. Verse 17. But Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, why do you reason because you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive nor understand? Is your heart still hardened? Do you have a hardened heart today? Verse 18. Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many basketfuls of fragments did you take up? They said to him, 12. Verse 20. Also when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large basketfuls of fragments did you take up? And they said 7. So he said to them, how is it you do not understand? How is it that you do not understand? That is a question we may be asked of ourselves. How many things has God done for you? Can you think of anything that God has done for you? Here's a better question. Is there anybody, raise your hand if there's anybody here that God has done nothing for you. All right, that would be interesting. Then how do we not understand? How do we not understand? Point number 1, seeking a sign. Point number 1, seeking a sign. If you don't have one of those papers, you write these points down. So we'll read Mark 8, 11 to 13 again. Then the Pharisees came out and began to dispute with him being Jesus, seeking from him a sign from heaven, testing them. But he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, why does this generation seek a sign? Assuredly I say to you, no sign shall be given to this generation. And he left them, and getting into the boat again, departed to the other side. Here is a question for reflection, for you to ponder on. Are you seeking a sign from God? Are you? Sometimes we are. Sometimes we go through life, our week, our day, a year, years, looking for a sign. I'm going to tell you where you could find it. Some of you already know. You pick up your Bible and you open it up and you start to read. God, what do you want me to do? And it's pretty plain. And if you don't understand what he's saying in one passage, you can interpret it by reading other passages. But you can't say that you have no direction while your Bible sits on the shelf, closed and unread. If you seek a sign, there are many signs that are already given, even to the unbeliever. One sign is creation. It says in Romans chapter 1, verse 20, in Romans chapter 1, verse 20, for since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. We are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they, us, are without excuse. Without excuse, because no one can say, look at everything, and honestly come up with the conclusion that there is no God. One sign is that there are Christians. It says in John chapter 13, verse 35. In John chapter 13, verse 35. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. And that is the essence of the Wednesday night Bible study. Now, I know we're supposed to love everyone, but our challenge on Wednesday is to not to neglect that, but to start loving each other here. And that's why I encourage you to come out to Wednesday night Bible studies, or even to the Love Week where we eat with everybody and we play games. And I heard there were charades last Wednesday. Those kids are really good. I don't know if I want to compete with them. But what if we could just love each other first, and then that? And as that grows, we can love others. When the world looks at Christians, it should be so evident that we are doing what the world does not do, and that is to love one another. They should be able to look at us and say, those must be Christians. Because look how they love each other. Look how they care for each other. But is that true? It sounds simple, but it's not easy. Simple, but not easy. Romans 12 has many examples how we should be acting, from brotherly love to instructing each other. Now here's the difference on the Pharisees. These people are not asking for proof for God, but proof that Jesus is God. Who else did something similar? We see this in Luke chapter 23, verse 8 through 9. Luke chapter 23, verses 8 through 9. Sorry if I'm starting to talk a little faster. The coffee's really kicking in right now. Now, when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he had desired for a long time to see him, because he had heard many things about him, and he hoped to see some miracle done by him. Then he questioned him with many words, but he answered him nothing. Here's something that we have to note, is that our God is not a genie that we could call upon at our will. At our desires, or in our timing. How many times have we been praying and we say, God, I need this now. If you don't do it now, I'm done. And when you're past whatever it is that you're going through, then you can look back and see that God had a more perfect timing, if that's grammatically correct. That his timing was perfect. And that we, in our timing, even though our heart was hurting, but the timing wasn't the perfect timing. As hard as that may be to hear, or to live through, even worse. Pharaoh in the book of Exodus was shown many signs and yet did not humble himself. Are you like Herod? Maybe God is showering blessings on you. And you're just taking it like whatever. Are you like the Pharaoh? Or maybe you're an unbeliever. Because you think, well, if I believe in God, that means I'm an idiot. Because only idiots believe in the Word. I have this saying that R.C. Sproul said, I really like. He said, you don't have to give up your intellect to trust the Bible. You don't have to give up your intellect. You have to give up your pride. But some of us are holding on. Pride is so important to us, right? It's like we're holding on even with the very last fingers. Can't lose that pride. How many of us are holding on to our pride? Any hands? No? I would say maybe. We have to distinguish between seeking and testing. Let's see this with faith in action. Let me read to you what a godly person who is seeking God in a life-threatening situation of going into the furnace answered in Daniel chapter 3, verse 16 through 18. Daniel chapter 3, verse 16 through 18. So, just to kind of set it up here, you might be like this person. These people are in real danger, life or death situation. But they had something they were holding on to. And it wasn't pride. It wasn't pride. It was God. What they were holding on to. In spite of their life being threatened. We read this. Chapter 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning, fiery furnace. Imagine that. They're going to get thrown into a furnace. They're going to die. They're being executed in fire. And if you've ever burned yourself, that hurts. Now imagine being burned completely. But this is what they're answering to this king. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. They are proclaiming that God is able. He can. It is possible if God desires. And they continue to say, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. And then I love what the next verse in Daniel 3:18 says. Because it's setting it up. It's saying, He is able. He can. He has the power. And the next part, does this exemplify your prayer? It starts with the but. BUT. But if not, let it be known to you, O King, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. So, isn't that amazing? He is able to, but if he does not, we will still not serve your gods. God is still our God. If he decides not to save us from this fiery furnace. God, I ask for this, but if it is not your will, you are still my God. I think if you're like me, maybe many times your prayer just ends, I need this. And you wait. See the difference? One wants a sign, the other says, even if God does not. One was testing God, the other knew that God was able if it was part of God's plan. What if it's not part of God's plan? Your wish, your desires. Maybe you've heard it put this way. What if the mountain that you need moved? God does not move. Then what? Well, if you're ex-military, what do, Ray? You climb straight up that mountain and see what God has for you. See what you learn on the way. Here's a personal reflection. God has blessed me more than I can count. The signs have been numerous. If I'm looking for a sign, I don't have to look forward, I can look back. The most important one is that God sent his only son, Jesus, to die for us. What more do I need than that? The rest are just blessings on top of blessings. Here's a couple. My wife, my children, and most of all, my salvation. I think everything else is a plus. These verses say that because of their spiritual blindness, Jesus left them. That should concern us. Point number 2, remembering. Now, in Mark 8:14 through 20, when we read that, now the disciples have forgotten to take bread, and they did not have more than one loaf with them in the boat. Then he charged them, saying, take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have no bread. But Jesus, being aware of it, said to them, why do you reason because you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive nor understand? Is your heart still hardened? Having eyes, do you not see? And having ears, do you not hear? And do you not remember when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000? How many basketfuls of fragments did you take up? They said to them, 12. Verse 20. Also, when I broke the 7 for the 4,000, how many large basketfuls of fragments did you take up? And they said 7. The danger here is to think in our natural senses. It's often easy to do and will sometimes make us forget. We have a huge memory problem. Remember when you asked forward. Now, for some of you, this is going to be real personal, right? Have you ever asked God to save your marriage? Or even before that, God, send me a wife. God, send me a husband. God, I want children. God, help me in my job. We can name so many things. Has anybody ever prayed that? Anybody ever sat there with their eyes closed, with deep desire for God to help them? I guarantee that there have been extreme, dire situations God has made a way for you to get out of. Has anyone here ever said, God, if you do this for me, I will do this for you? I have. Chances are you have. God came through. And here's the kicker. Once he came through, you probably didn't. Right? I got what I needed. Thank you, God. Now I'm going to go on my way and do what I want to do. We forget that God is faithful. A question I give to you that has been asked of me many times before is, think of all the great things God has done for you. How many great things has God done for you till now? Probably too many to count. Probably too many to count. So if he has done all these great things, is your current trial too much for God? Is it? I don't know what you're going through, Manny, right now. But whatever it is, it's not too big for God. You got to turn. And we might be in a place where we say, I know what I see in front of me, and I see the situation, but God. But God. And the reason I use that is because it says in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 4 through 5. And I'm going to read through these because there's quite a few. I want to show you an example in the Word where things were not going the way they were planning, and then God intervened. In Ephesians chapter 2, verses 4 through 5, it says, but God, who is rich in mercy, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace, but God, because that was what God did. Acts chapter 13, verse 29. Now when they had fulfilled all that was written concerning him, they took him down from the tree and laid him in the tomb, but God raised him from the dead. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 6. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. Romans chapter 5, verses 7 through 8. For scarcely for a righteous man will one die, yet perhaps for a good man someone would even dare to die. Verse 8, but God demonstrates his own love towards us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. But God demonstrates. Acts chapter 7, verse 9. And the patriarchs became envious, sold Joseph into Egypt, but God was with him. And that's what mattered, that God was with him. Psalm chapter 73, verse 26. My flesh and my heart fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. If we see our walk with God as us holding on to him, we can easily be discouraged. Why? Because we are ever changing. Our strength gets weak at times. But this is the way we should look at it. We should see that God is holding on to us. Then we can see that we are in the hands of a God who is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Maybe we can't, maybe I can't. Our strength is fading, but God. And yet, with all the mighty things God does, sometimes we do not understand. This brings us to point number 3. How do we not understand? So, the Pharisees are asking for a sign. The disciples are not understanding. We are sometimes like those people. We want to see a sign when there's already so many. We don't understand when God has already came through so many times. One time somebody told me about like an eagle. An eagle can, when it flies so high, it can see so far. We should be like those eagles because we have already seen God's power. We already know what he is able to do. So although our present situation may be dire, we know that God is bigger than our present situation. Point number 3, how do we not understand? We have seen all the signs of God's love in our life. We remember his love, and we still do not understand. The disciples did not, and they were with Jesus. Right? So they were with Jesus, and they didn't understand. So maybe you feel a little better because of that. I'm not going to let you off the hook that easy. We're going to read in chapter 8:21. This is the last verse. This is the last point. Mark chapter 8, verse 21. It says this. So he said to them, how is it you do not understand? So far, and backtrack a little bit, clearly we see God in creation. Clearly we see God in our kids. Clearly we see God in the stars. Clearly we see God in our situations, our trials, our joy. Is there any situation too small or too big for him not to care for us? Seek the Lord, as it says to Isaiah chapter 55, verse 2. Isaiah chapter 55, verse 2. It says this, seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, and he will have mercy on him. And to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours, and my thoughts than your thoughts. Isn't that incredible? We think we have all the right ideas of how we're going to do it, and then God comes along and he has a different idea. And sometimes we say, God, I don't know what you're thinking right now, but let me show you a little plan that I have. You know, little point system, right? Roman numeral 1. Depending on how you have it set up. Can anyone here say that God has not somehow impacted their life? If that's the case, then you need to talk to somebody here before you leave. If you feel like God has not been communicating with you, I found many verses about those who have ears, and I stopped counting. I didn't want to write them all down. Which indicates to me that if I cannot see or not hear, then there is something happening with who? Anybody know the answer to that? I'm kind of deaf. Yeah, yes, with you. There's not something wrong with God. We see this in Matthew, and I'm gonna be quick about this because there's quite a few verses, but we see this in Matthew 11:15. It says, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Matthew 13:9 says basically the same thing. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Mark 4:9, and he said to them, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. I guess I could have just said them all and said the same thing once, right? Luke chapter 14, verse 35. It is neither fit for the land nor for the dunghill, but men throw it out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. It is an eye issue. Or as some say, we tend to have me-itis. I cannot see, I cannot hear, I do not desire, I do not seek. There's one thing that proves without a doubt that no one else would do for another, what God has done for us through his Son, Jesus. And what he continues to do for us in his mercy. We woke up one more day with breath. For some of us, maybe the last day. It's maybe the last day for me, or for you. What are you going to do with that day? If you have not given your life to the Lord, now is the time. Now! Now is the time. Not tomorrow, not in the next hour, like an hour from now, now. That's not a joke. That's not even a recommendation. That's like, have you ever had something that needed to be done so badly that you could do nothing else? That's what that should be like. And maybe you're an unbeliever. There's an example of that in the Word in Mark chapter 9, verse 24. Mark chapter 9, verse 24. Listen to what this father cried out. And when it says the word cried out, it means he, in the Greek, it's saying that he shouted. He actually cried out. Like one of those, have you ever heard somebody like that just cries out and you could feel their emotion? You could feel their whole heart in it. Like it's like you're it's almost like you're them. Like you know what they're feeling. Like when a mother cries for their children. A deep feeling. It says this in Mark chapter 9, verse 24. It says, immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, he had tears in his eyes, Lord, I believe, help me, help my unbelief. If you're an unbeliever, ask God to help you in your unbelief. He was crying out. That's what it should be from you. Crying out. A desire, a sincere desire for help. Do we desire to be spiritually blind so that God opens our eyes? If your eyes are not open, you need to ask God to open them. There's something that you could think of during the week. If you have been seeking a sign, open the Word. When's the last time you opened it? And ask God as you open your Word, God, what do you want me to see today? Ask Him. I also want you to remember who God was, is, and will always be. And the last thing is understand that God has a plan. And it's not necessarily our plan. Now, I do want to say that sometimes that's real hurtful. Some of us, we lost people. Some of us are praying for people. How does that all fit together? I don't know. But God says that He has a plan for us. And I trust in God. There used to be a man who came to this church, his brother Joseph and Maria. I don't know if anybody here knows him, but Joseph was French, right? He spoke French, and they used to talk to each other. So he had a very deep voice, and I would love it when he would say this. He said, very simple. He said, I believe so because God said so. Let's pray. God, without a doubt, there's people here who are more than likely hurting. And they're here for a reason. And I don't know exactly what they were searching for, but I hope that they found you. It has nothing to do with me, Lord, because I have nothing to offer but you. I pray that they open their word, which is your word, and they seek you, and that they can find you, Lord, even though you're not the one lost. That their eyes, the eyes of their heart are open, Lord. That they're not losing their intellect, but their faith. I also pray for Sister Mel, who's been on my mind. I've been sick and I haven't been able to see her. Pray for her recovery, Lord. In your son's mighty name.